Shalom. I'd like to start out by giving all glory, praise, and honor to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Urchak Wadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the Great Millstone, and Shalom to the elect of Israel. This is the Mayim in Atlanta, and I wanted to touch on the Palestinians today. And we usually go into Amalek, also known as the Small Hatters or the 1948ers, pretty often because they're our number one enemy. They're in our land, claiming to be us, and doing all sorts of underhand, subtle things to keep us down. And so that's our number one enemy, the head tribe, Amalek, of the nation of Edom. Edom being the self-proclaimed white people, as well as the Small Hatters or 1948ers. They're all the same people, all come from Esau, Edom. But there's also another group of people that are in our land and who have staked a claim into it, the Palestinians. And I know them to be Ishmaelites and not from the ancient Philistines. So let's take a look into them, because they also have a punishment that they're going to get for parting the Lord's land. And so this is a article from heyalma.com, and it's entitled "The Palestinians." Who are the Palestinians? It says the slogan, "A land without a people for a people without a land," was popular among some early Zionists when referring to what would have become the state of Israel. And the Bible does not speak of a state of Israel. It speaks of a people and it speaks of a land, but no state, no Balfour declared state of Israel. It says, however, in the 1920s, when the British were in control of what was then widely known as the Holy Land, or Palestine, the population included 162,000 Jews and 790,000 Muslim and Christian Arabs. The clashing nationalist aspirations of the Jews and the Arabs in the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, which had for the previous 400 years been under the rule of the Ottoman Turks, sits at the heart of this whole conflict. And that whole conflict's going on because you both do not belong there. It says, here we'll break down who the Palestinian people are and what most people mean today when they say Palestine. Ready. It says, is Palestine mentioned in the Bible? And it says, sorta. And it says, word, which is Aramaic, plistim, not pronouncing that right, but we'll, Lord willing, get into it when it shows in the Hebrew. It says mainly in 1 Samuel, referring to the Philistines. The Philistines, if you know your Hebrew Bible, are a seagoing people in conflict with the Israelites, and that's correct. The Philistines were some of our largest enemies, especially in the beginning in setting up Israel. Goliath was a Philistine. It says today's Palestine in Arabic took their name from the land named for the ancient people, although few claim to be directly descended from their biblical namesakes. And so yes, the Philistines actually descend from Ham through Mizraim, which Mizraim is the land set up for him, or Mizraim is what Egypt was called before, and they descend through Mizraim. It says took their name from the land name for the ancient people, although if you claim that. It says, when did people start referring to the land as Palestine? The name Palestine has appeared on countless maps and documents throughout history, starting all the way back with hieroglyphics on an ancient Egyptian temple in 1150 BCE, so before the Common Era, or before Yahushai. It says when Jays ruled under, which I'm trying not to say that just for to get flagged, to not get flagged. It says when Jays ruled under various configurations beginning circa 1000 BCE, the area was variously known as the Kingdom of Israel, Judea, and Samaria. Under the Roman Empire, Jay's sovereignty ended in the Holy Land by 70 CE, or Common Era. Syria Palestina was a province that combined Roman Syria and Roman Judea. And so 70 AD is a big time in which the Romans came down on us and we fled from our land into West Africa and also parts of Europe, and we've been scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, so various other areas, parts of the world we fled into. This is Syria Palestina was a province that combined Roman Syria and Roman Judea, so the name of this region changed from Judea to Palestine, possibly to minimize J-ish connection to the land. And so that is when the name was changed under the Romans. It says, let's fast forward a few hundred years. Palestine becomes a province of the Byzantine Christians, which those were Israelites basically running Rome after Esau was kicked out. It says, then the Umayyad and Abbasid Muslim Caliphate. Then the Crusades happened, where Christian warriors headed to the Holy Land to win it back from the Muslims, and many of their maps and descriptions refer to Jerusalem as situated in the land of Palestine. Judea and Samaria are called a part of Palestine. And my understanding is that during the Dark Ages, around the 600s and 700s, with the spread of Islam, is when a lot of these people got in there as well. So it says, fast forward again to the Ottomans. The far-flung Turkish Empire starts around 1300. And what do you know? Palestine, or the Mutasarrifate of Jerusalem, becomes an Ottoman district by 1516 or so, including all the major places names we know today as Hebron, Jaffa, Jerusalem, Gaza, etc. And so when did the Palestinians enter the scene? So when did Palestinian national consciousness and Palestinians as we know them today emerge? Lots of people have lots of different perspectives, like most things in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Starting in 1516, the area of Palestine was ruled by the Ottomans. Living there were longtime inhabitants, migrants from neighboring Syria, Lebanon, and what is now Jordan, in a small Jewish community. In 1834, there was something called the Peasants' Revolt, which some scholars point to as the formative event of the Palestinian people. Rashid Khalidi, a prominent Palestinian historian, argues Palestinian nationality/identity has never been exclusive, arguing that Arabism, Islam, and local loyalties all play critical roles. Other historians argue that Palestinian nationalism only emerged as a reaction to Zionism in the mandatory British Palestine period. Khalidi writes, although the Zionist challenge definitely helped to shape the specific form Palestinian national identification took, it is a serious mistake to suggest that Palestinian identity emerged mainly as a response to Zionism. And so it's about as far as we're going to go into this. There's the Ottoman Turks, which on the lower rungs of the Turks are Arabs, which Arab means mixture, and usually it's a mixture of Ishmael and Elam. Ishmael being the majority, because Elam seems to be a little further east, but the head of the Turks, from reading, seems to be Edomites, which is why they are a part of the EU. But for the most part, these people are Ishmaelites. So let's go look into Ishmael. This is the book of Genesis, chapter 16, and we'll start at 11. And the angel of the Lord Yahweh said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael. So that's the forefather of many of the Arabs today. As I said earlier, it means mixture, and it seems to be mostly Ishmael and Elam, which you can't mix seed. You are what your father is. So they're either Ishmael or Elam, or whichever other nation they could possibly come from. But they go back. This is one of their forefathers, or if they do indeed go back to Ishmael. It says, Because the Lord Yahweh hath heard thy affliction, and he will be a wild man, his hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And so they're right there in what's called the Middle East, or as Elder Malcolm calls it, Western Asia. And they are there in the presence of all the other nations, the surrounding nations. And they are wild. They blow themselves up in suicide bombings. Let's switch to the blue letter. And we're going to go to 1 Chronicles. And we're going to start at this first chapter and the 8th verse. It says, The sons of Ham are Cush and Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. We're going to skip down to 11 to see Mizraim's lineage. And it says, Mizraim begat Ludum and Anamim and Laabim and Naphtuhim and Pathrusim and Casluhim, of whom came the Philistines, and Caphthorim. So Mizraim, which that's where Egypt comes from Mizraim, begat Calsuhim, and that's where the Philistines came from Casluhim. So let's get that word for the Philistines. And it's Strong's H6430. And it says, Philistine equals immigrants, an inhabitant of Philistia, descendants of Mizraim, who immigrated from Caphtor, or Crete, to the western sea coast of Canaan. And you see it, the word Philistine appears 287 times within the scriptures, because they were big time enemies to Israel. And just to see a little bit more, but this refers to the ancient Philistines, but there's still people there, and you can see when you click on this root word here, Strong's H6429, and that goes to Philistia, land of sojourners, the general territory on the west coast of Canaan, or the entire country of Palestine. So the west coast of Canaan, you could even think of the West Bank currently. It says, or the entire country of Palestine. And so it's referred, the same word goes to Palestina, it goes to Philistia, to Philistine, and to Palestine. And then take a look at this. It says, the land of wanderers or strangers, of a region on the southern shore of Syria to the south and west of Canaan, called by Josephus, a name, however, which he elsewhere uses for the whole of the land of the Israelites. And so these are other people that are in the Lord's land, in the land of Israel, staking a claim to it. And so we looked at the word for Philistine, but this one is speaking to the inhabitants of the land. And I thought it was interesting when you go into it, there are a lot of prophetic scriptures linked to this, and not so much to the people, the Philistines, the descendants of Ham. This is speaking to the people that are here now in the present day, and it links them to some of our top enemies. So we'll start here at Psalm 60 and 8. It says, Moab is my washpot, Moab being the modern day Chinese. Over Edom will I cast out my shoe, Edom being the self-proclaimed white people. And then it says, Philistia, triumph thou because of me. And so it's linking the destruction that's involved with Moab and Edom to these same people, to Philistia. And we know that Ishmael is in just as much, or not as much trouble as Edom, but they're outside of the covenant nonetheless. And they had a big part in our downfall. We know about the sub-Saharan slave trade and just the slave trades of the Arabs in general. And they had a huge part in our downfall. So the Lord's going to drop them as well. Moving on, goes to Psalms 83. And we go into Psalms 83 often because it explains and shows all of our enemies. We'll just take a look at it here. And we'll go. Actually, we'll just read this. And it's going down the list of. We'll start at 5. It says, For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. And that's the different nations are enemies that have worked together to put the name of Israel out of remembrance. It says the tabernacles of Edom, so number one enemy, and the Ishmaelites, which Ishmael are the same place that these modern day Palestinians, or they descend from Ishmael, is basically what I'm trying to say, of Moab and the Hagarenes, Moab being the Chinese, Gebal and Ammon being the Japanese, and Amalek are the small hatters, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre. So that's another reference back to Ishmael, to the Arabs. They're right there mentioned with them, with Amalek mentioned with Edom. These are big time enemies, so the Lord is plaguing them because you have to keep the law, statutes, and commandments within that land. And they, for the most part, worship Allah, or they worship Christianity and white Jesus and all that. You can't do that in that land, or else the Lord is going to plague you. And He's not doing it with she-bears as he did in the time of Elisha. Right now he's using his sword, which is Edom. And he's plaguing those people with the violence that they've been getting since Israel became a state. Moving down, they're also in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, and I think that's interesting because it goes into Lucifer being brought down, which you go into that word, it's the light bearers, but it's also going into the king of Babylon. And so I think it's interesting. It's showing the fall of Palestine with the king of Babylon, because when anybody who's in that land of Israel, it's going to get nuked and they will be burnt up with the rulership of the king of Babylon, which goes into pretty much, it's talking about the elite of Edom. It says, rejoice. This is Isaiah 14:29. Rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent. How, O gate, cry, O city, thou whole Palestina art dissolved. For there shall come from the north a smoke, and none shall be alone in his appointed times. And so that's that. And we'll look at this last in Joel chapter 3. And we'll start out at verse 2. It says, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. And the Palestinians are a part of that. They scattered us through their different slave trades, the sub-Saharan slave trade, and their different Arab slave trades. And they are currently in the land of Israel. And so they're just as guilty, or at least very guilty, maybe not just as guilty as Esau, Edom, and Amalek, but they're guilty. They shouldn't be there, and they're being plagued because they're there. But let's skip down to verse 4. It says, yeah, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coasts of Palestine? And so that's the only time you'll see the word Palestine there, because they're just as much involved. Speaking to the Ishmaelites, will you render me a recompense? And if you recompense me swiftly and speedily, will I return your recompense upon your head? And so, to sum it up, they have a judgment that is about to come, and it's happening already. That's why Amalek's kicking their butts right now, and there's more blood that will be coming, because those people do not belong in the land. Amalek doesn't belong in there, and Ishmael does not belong in the land. Only the Israelites belong there. And so there will be no peace as long as these people are there. It's not coming until the return of Yahweh and him setting up his kingdom in that spot that they're currently in. And so, Lord willing, that was edifying. I'd like to give all glory, praise, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, or Kakwadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the great millstone. Shalom to the elect of Israel. Shalom.